Can you draw a dot and another dot and connect them to draw a line? Now draw lots of lines. Connect lines to draw the basic shapes: square, triangle, circle. Now draw lots and lots of basic shapes. This is a duck. The duck can be broken down into basic shapes. For correct proportions, pay attention to the sizes of the basic shapes and how they compare to the other shapes around them. But also pay attention to the negative space. There are shapes around the duck too. You can trace to start off with, but practice this from observation to get even better. Basic shapes are the starting point you build upon. But how many shapes do you really need to represent a duck? What about 3D? Well, draw a square. Draw another square. Connect the corners, you have a 3D shape. Draw a triangle. Draw another triangle. Connect the corners, 3D shape. Draw lots of these 3D shapes. Remember the circle? Squash the circle to create an ellipse or a squashed circle. Draw lots of squashed circles. Draw one squashed circle and another squashed circle and connect their corners. Hey look, a tube or a cylinder. Draw lots of tubes. If you draw curved lines on the tube, notice the direction of the curve dictates the direction of the tube. Practice that. You can use spirals to practice that too. Let me put this into perspective for you. Draw a horizon line, mark a vanishing point in the middle, and draw lines coming out of the vanishing point. Nice 1-point perspective grid. On your grid, draw a square. Draw lines from the corners following the guide and connecting them with a straight vertical line. Nice 3D shape in 1-point perspective. Notice how shapes drawn above the horizon line show their bottom face, and shapes drawn below the horizon line show their top face. Shapes drawn both above and below the horizon line show neither face. Cool perspective. Notice how shapes drawn on the right of the center line show their left face, and shapes drawn on the left of the center line show their right face. You can construct other shapes out of squares by drawing on their faces, or draw them directly after practice. The better you get, the less you will need to rely on the guide. This 1-point perspective is good for indoor scenes. Let's get crazy with 2-point perspective. Draw a horizon line, mark 2 vanishing points at either end, and draw lines coming out of each vanishing point. 2-point perspective grid. Draw 2 vertical lines and connect them following the guide. Draw more lines following the guide towards the other vanishing point and connect them with a vertical line. Now you have a 3D shape in 2-point perspective. Again, noticing how the shapes appear above and below the horizon line. Don't be afraid to sketch it out and clean it up. It doesn't have to be precise. You can construct other shapes out of squares just like before. What happens when the vanishing points are super close together? You get this weird warped perspective, right? Usually the vanishing points are far off screen. Now practice combining shapes together, constructing whole scenes. 2D perspective is very good for outdoor scenes. Welcome back to our duck. Now that we know basic shapes, 3D shapes, 1-point and 2-point perspective, we can draw our duck in 3D perspective. Let's break it down into basic shapes again. Notice how this all fits within a square. We'll use this. Pay attention to the relationship between the shapes and the negative space. Using this as a guide, we can also draw the front view of the duck. Now using a 2-point perspective grid, draw the side square view following the perspective and build up the duck's shapes. Remember when I said to pay attention to the relationship between the shapes and negative space? Yeah, keep doing that. Now you can draw in the front view as thick as you like. How thick is your duck? Now we have a 3D constructed duck in perspective. You can use this as a base to build upon, smooth out and fix areas if you want. Keep practicing this and you won't even need the guide anymore. Cool, right? But what about organic shapes? Well, organic shapes are just block shapes smoothed out. You can imagine the faces of a basic 3D shape, being able to dissect them to create even more faces. extruding, pushing, pulling to create more complex shapes. There are endless amounts of faces. You can imagine it as a wireframe. See if you can draw 3D shapes with wireframes. Create some organic shapes. They may look complicated, but remember, they can be simplified into more basic shapes. Because everything is just shapes. Hands, they're just shapes. Anatomy, again, it's just shapes. A muscular duck flexing and popping a kickflip while wearing a backwards hat, shapes. Keep drawing shapes, and with practice, you too can draw whatever you want.